Welcome to Woman Witness Podcast, The Stories at the Well. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. Hi, my name is Leah Fortier, and this is Woman Witness Podcast, The Stories at the Well. Today, I have a special guest, a special friend, and someone who is going to really shed light into our conversation today. I cannot wait to get started. I cannot wait to talk more about our topic today. But before we introduce Nicole and get this podcast started, when we gather at this well, we always open it with prayer and with a clean heart. That way that we are able to speak the words that need to be spoken, speak something that a family, a mom, a sister, a daughter will be able to use and take into their lives and perhaps share it with another sister. So Nicole, thank you for coming to this well, Lord. We thank you for bringing Nicole and her wealth of knowledge. We ask that we're able just to have a clean, candid conversation, that someone will be able to walk away fuller than what they came, and that this well of living water will continue to flow. Lord, we love you. We thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, Nicole, thank you so much. Let me introduce Nicole. Nicole is a registered dietitian, nutritionist. She is a mom of 3 lovely little humans who takes initiative in an eating and diet-free approach to food. And her online practice is devoted to helping individuals and families reclaim their joy and find food freedom through her one-on-one nutrition counseling and group programming. So, Nicole, I brought you here today because I love your approach. When I think about diet, perhaps it's just me. It is scary. It is a place in my mind, and I can only talk about me, but a lot of women can relate, that it's scary. It requires a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of practice, a lot of preparation. So I brought you here because I love your approach and I've seen it work. And I know that if you would share a little bit with us about how to enter this road, this journey, this happy journey with food, I think a lot of us would benefit from that. So, Nicole, let's start by just telling us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What are some of the things that we need to know about Nicole?
Oh, Leah, I love you. Yes, I want to dive into all of these things. And I think you hit on so many important pieces there, just with how it can feel so overwhelming. And there's so many pieces with the preparation, all the things. And one of the things that I think of when it comes to, food is that, yes, there's some practical aspects around cooking and preparing food and, really making sure that we're getting some variety in and all of those things. But food shouldn't be stressful on top of that. And we often carry all of this extra like emotional baggage and stress with eating perfectly and, making sure that we're doing the like quote unquote right diet and all of those things. And it doesn't have to be that hard. So, I mean, I could tell you a little bit about myself as well, which is, I came into doing this work because I struggled with food myself, where food felt anything but joyful, was incredibly stressful, was really actually harming my health. I was so worried about my health and my thinness and all of those things that it actually ended up really harming my health and impacting my life and my ability to function. And so I, eventually got some support, got treatment with that through a dietitian and a therapist, and really what I like to say is healed my relationship with food so that I can eat in a way that better serves me both nutritionally and mentally and emotionally. And I think that's part of what we miss in our culture so much, is that we're so focused on the physical aspects of nutrition that it actually ends up interfering with our mental and emotional health. So now I help, individuals and families heal their relationship with food. And that's on an individual basis with teenagers and adults doing the work. And I work with a lot of parents so that they can actually lay the foundations for their children to have a healthy relationship with food and hopefully not go down these rabbit holes of dieting and restriction and binge eating and all sorts of different behaviors that we often see with food.
Yeah. Nicole, I love that so much. And you said a lot of points that I really want to touch on. And I want to take a deeper dive into it. And if you don't mind, Nicole, I want to go
Yeah.
back when you were a witness to even with you having that unhealthy relationship with food. And I don't even know if you call it unhealthy, which is why I want to talk to you about it. You kind of combined a little bit about with your personal experiences with food
Mhm.
and how that can possibly maybe be harmful. When you said you went to a therapist and also you met with a dietitian and a nutritionist. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the trauma that we carry with food, if you will. I can tell you, coming from my background and coming
Mhm.
from some of the things that I struggled with food, it is so deep, girl. I really don't even know where to start. And I think a lot of listeners can relate because I do believe that sometimes it could be a cultural thing. It could be maybe the way I was raised. It could be a lot of different things that I battle. So,
Mhm.
my question to you, Nicole, is one, what are some signs that I, a woman, a parent, who
Mhm.
possibly have struggled with food trauma or food, something cultural in my background, how can I take that trauma, identify it,
Mhm.
and move forward with a healthy way of preparation and expectations for my children and my family?
Where do we start, right? Well, I think one and the biggest thing that I always talk about is, like, we have to have some awareness about that, because so
Yeah.
often we're just operating, right? We're just operating from what we know, the way that we were brought up, the stories that we were told, what we believe to just automatically be true about food. And
Mhm.
you brought up the culture. And so I like to think of it as we all have our own stories because we have what happened in our homes, our
Right.
family food culture growing up, but then we have
Mhm.
the culture as a whole as well,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
impacts
Yeah.
us. So
Mm,
there's people, I've worked with so many clients who in health class were taught about, what they should or shouldn't eat. That sent them down a
mhm,
spiral of feeling
mhm,
guilty for eating those foods that were on the bad list that they shouldn't have eaten, or a coach telling them to cut things
mhm,
out, or that they needed to lose weight to be faster, or,
yeah.
whatever those things are. Open up the magazines and we just see these ideas around, or maybe we don't say magazines anymore. Open up social media. Right, I used to open up the magazines, but social
Right.
media,
No,
we see all of these, right?
yeah,
But the images of thinness, and
right,
I mean, literally growing up though, the magazines were all about every
right,
magazine had a diet in it. What's the
right,
new diet plan? What is so and so eating to maintain their weight? What are,
right,
all of those things.
right.
So it's the culture as a whole, but it's also our culture at home, being, were you
Yeah,
taught that you had to clean your plate? Or were you
yeah,
taught that you had to
abs
take 2 more bites,
right,
Were you restricted of certain foods? Or,
right,
I have clients who were being told by their parents that they were too big or should lose some weight in so many different ways, yet at the
mhm,
same time, we're told they had to finish their plate, right? So,
right,
like, there's so many mixed messages and confusion around that,
right,
and so it's the culture as a whole, and it's our own culture at home. And so
right,
first, it's just having awareness about that
mhm,
we have these ideas around food and beliefs about food, and I like to just start questioning that. And, there's a saying, right? Well, there's 2 sayings, so I like to look at both of them. Beliefs are just thoughts that you keep on thinking,
yeah,
or beliefs are thoughts that you no longer think because we just take them to be truths.
Mhm.
And so, so many of these ideas about
Yeah.
food to us, we don't even question. They're just so ingrained in us. And so, how can we start to just even question the ideas
Mhm.
that we have about food, you know? And I think that's one big part. We have to have awareness. We want to have
Yeah.
awareness about our own behaviors with food. If we
Yeah.
feel like we're out of control around food, preoccupied with certain foods, if we notice
Mhm.
that we consistently eat past fullness or eat to a place we don't feel good, do we
Yeah.
carry guilt and shame around for our food choices? Do we
Mhm.
find ourselves restricting ourselves when we're not or when we're hungry, but telling ourselves, how could you be hungry yet? Or you shouldn't eat, right? So many
Yeah.
things. So we just have to have some awareness around what's coming up for us in our own relationship with food to start.
I absolutely love what you said, especially about carrying around that shame and that guilt, because I do believe that it starts from when we are younger. I do believe that it
Mhm.
starts from some of the practices and the behaviors that we learned growing up. I came from a
Yeah.
big family. We didn't have a lot, but when the food was prepared, we had to eat what we were able to eat. And if you didn't, then, you know, as we grew up, yes, it got better, but at the same time, we still had those stipulations in place that I now have in my head. So I'm not going to lie. I do over provide for my children, and I can only talk about
Yeah.
myself. I do. I make sure that there's always snacks in the pantry.
Yeah.
I do. I make sure that I have enough. I overcook
Mhm.
because I don't want to run out, nor do I want my kids to go hungry. If I was to take a look at myself, and I've done this since meeting you, I had to go down, and I'm a writer, so I love to write things down. And I had to go
Yeah.
back and say, Leah, is this something that perhaps is deeply rooted in your life? And what are some things that I can do differently when making dinner for my kids? What are some other ways that I can approach food with my children? I don't want them to overcook. I don't want them to overeat. I don't want them to overbuy and spend, Nicole, because it's a sad day when we have to throw out the food that we indulged in. If
Mhm.
that makes any sense. If you can, Nicole, if you don't mind helping me as a mom, because I know that there are a lot of listeners out there who are like me, who carry around that trauma, and we pass it on to our children. And I don't feel good about it, to be honest with you. So I know that there's going to come a day where they may not feel good about it. So,
Yeah.
how can I better zone in on some of these behaviors to create a more healthy relationship for my kids and my family with food?
Yeah, for sure. And you're hitting on those two things that are so important. One is like it's our actions with food, right? The actions that we're taking, whether that's the way that we're eating or in the way that we buy and prepare food and how we feed our children. And then it's also in the language that we use when we're talking to our kids about things that really
Mm,
often passes on that shame as well, you know? And I've had so many clients share those things with me that they felt guilty for the way that they would eat, even if it comes from things like, let's say, quote unquote, I don't like the term picky eating, but most of us know what we're talking about. So having a
yeah,
picky eater and then maybe be made to feel like something was wrong with them or that they were doing something bad or wrong because they didn't like certain foods, right?
right,
So it's
right,
in the way that we handle those situations, the way that we talk to our kids about food and what they're eating. We often either do the same thing that our parents did just because that's what
right,
we know and that's like what a family's supposed to look like and do, or we
right,
react the other way, right? Because we don't want our kids to have the same situation that we did. You know, some of it is just again going back to like, okay, I have this awareness that I tend to overbuy and overprovide and never want my children to go without, etc. And there's nothing wrong with making sure that our families are provided for, right?
mm,
But if we're noticing that that feels out of balance because there's some sort of consequence to that, I feel like we have a lot of food waste. I feel like I'm throwing things away constantly, right?
yeah,
That's what says it's out of balance for us, you know? So there
mm,
isn't this inherent like right, wrong, anything. It's that are there some consequences that are occurring from that? Now, what can I do to make that different? You know?
yeah,
And so like hitting on deeper stuff, right? Because it's really
There we are.
noticing what comes up in me, right? Because that's the thing. It's like,
Absolutely.
okay, well, I can give you the practical aspects and say, hey, Leah, let's come up with a meal plan for your family. What do you need to buy this week, et cetera? And then it's really doing that check though and going, okay, are you comfortable with that? Or what comes up for you when
Yeah.
we're talking about only buying this amount? Or we have the opposite with so many. I will have to talk to a lot of clients about, well, what makes you uncomfortable about bringing chips into your home? Maybe it's
Mm,
I'm scared I'm going to eat them all if I bring them
yeah.
in, or right, like
100%.
maybe I think
Yeah.
that those are bad or unhealthy and my kids shouldn't have them. And so now we're restricting certain foods, we're making our kids feel bad for wanting chips, right? Like there's just
Yeah.
all of these different ways that those things
Right.
can play out.
Right. Nicole, I love that so much. And I hate to bring it always back to us as moms, and perhaps some of the listeners here who are caretakers of even their parents or people in their lives or homes who struggle with food, whether it's, to the extreme or, either way, it's a struggle. So
Mhm,
I love the fact that we're bringing this in because this is a podcast and it's a podcast for women and it's geared for to us. And I do believe that when we address our own insecurities with food and we address our own trauma with I'm so sorry. I'm stuck on that because I do believe that it is a relationship. And by, like you said, getting that relationship in balance would help us with our children, help us in our lives as ourselves, and help us, like you said, have a better relationship with food. I want to go just a little bit deeper, Nicole, because I can tell myself that food, I have it under control. But if my genes are screaming, you don't have it under control, Leah, help me connect this moment. In my mind, I'm saying I'm fine. In my mind, I'm saying I'm making good food choices and I feel comfortable. I'm happy with it. But my
mhm.
clothes are screaming different. So help me connect the two. I'm sorry.
I just wanna tell you something real quick about what you just said about, it always comes back to us. I have a client that every time we're talking, I have a group program, every time we're talking it, she's like, "Gosh darn it, Nicole, every single time it just comes back to me, doesn't it? It just comes back to
Yes.
me," right? Because she's like, "My
Yeah.
kids are doing this and they're doing this." She's like, "Oh, it always comes back to me," right? So we really have to look
Yeah.
at our own stuff that's coming up around food.
And nobody
So
likes looking at themselves. I'm
no,
sorry.
no.
But
So let me start by asking you this. If you say, I feel like I have it under control, I'm
Mhm.
doing well, I'm happy, it feels good, everything's good, but my
Yeah.
jeans are screaming at me, then why not just buy new jeans that fit?
Oh, well, I've done that, Nicole. That's a for me, it's a roller coaster.
So tell me
And
more about that. What do you mean by that?
okay, so I think a lot of our listeners can relate. And I have at least 3 different sets of clothing because
Mhm,
it is a roller coaster. One moment,
mhm,
I may feel that I'm doing great, and then I can make adjustments by just buying a bigger pair of jeans.
mhm,
When I really get serious, this is usually around the beginning of the year. It's about to kick in again. I feel it. And I'm going to tell myself I'm about to start this amazing diet. It's going to be great. I'm going to pull back out those size a little smaller than what these ones are now, right?
mhm,
Because I'm going to lose the pant size to get
mhm.
back into a smaller
Yeah.
size. That may change. And for me, maybe in a lot of people listening, is there a one size fits all, if you will, solution to ending that cycle? Because I feel like it could be a cycle versus like a diet thing.
It is a cycle for most people because
Mhm,
diets typically don't work. So we
mm,
know that 95% of the people that go on diets
mhm,
gain the weight back. And the
mm.
majority of those people gain back even more weight than they lost.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, this happens for physical and
yeah,
emotional reasons, both. So, physical
yeah.
reasons, our body feels starved and deprived and goes into starvation mode. Then we gain weight back, and then our body says, wait, you're going to starve me again. I better make sure I hold on to this weight even more because you're going to try to lose it again. And so our bodies don't feel physically
Hmm.
safe when we're eating in a deficit and restricting them of certain nutrients. So
Hmm.
physically, our
Makes sense.
bodies don't like us to do that, right? They're trying to be protective.
Yeah, makes a lot of
We
sense.
also have the emotional deprivation that comes with that, right? That sense of I can't eat certain foods, I can't eat enough food. Oftentimes, when we limit our intake, we feel hungry and then we don't allow ourselves to eat. And then there's like this sense of relief, like, okay, I can just eat again.
Yeah,
And then we often rebound from that. And
yeah,
then we go and then we gain back more weight because then we rebound eat. So it is often a cycle. Then we're uncomfortable in our body. Then we do the thing again to try to lose the weight. And then we only can do that for so long. And then it happens again, right? So it is this cycle. We call it weight cycling, even. And we know that kids who are
mhm.
restricted or who diet or anything like that are more likely to weight cycle as they get older as well. And so once people start diets, they tend to go in that same pattern of cycling through and trying to like be good, eat right, and then give up for a while and then be good, eat right, etc.
And that makes so much sense, Nicole, because yes, it is a cycle. And I guess now it comes down to, I'm sorry, I'm back at this again. And I know I'm talking about myself, and I don't want to talk about myself, but I'm talking to you. And only the best way that I feel to get the rawest information and the best information for our listeners
Yeah.
is to talk from a place of being a witness, and even in my
Yeah.
own life and with my own weight and food relationship, because I don't want to pass it on to my children. Knock
Yeah.
on wood, I have boys, but that does not mean that the boys don't suffer
Mm-mm.
through eating patterns just like we do. And I think if I hear you correctly in what you're saying that if I have this cycle within myself and I am following diets, right? I'm following the next keto diet. I'm following the best fat burning pills and everything along those lines. So I am following these different diet patterns. And you're right, I am sending myself down this roller coaster. And I think if what I hear you saying correctly is, instead of maybe perhaps following a diet, if I'm tired of this cycle, which I am, ooh, I'm really talking about myself today. Sorry, guys, which I am, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other ladies are. We're
Yes.
tired of this. I hear you saying that I have to get in touch with the root of it all. What is the root of my eating? Why am I going up and down with it? Is that what you would suggest that I do? Or would you suggest that I just continue on the roller coaster? Because I don't want to be on it anymore. And I don't want to pass it to my kids, and I don't want to put these same restrictions on them either.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so my work is all based around, right, finding freedom with food and getting off of these roller coasters. So that would not be my recommendation, is that you continue on it. So there's a couple points that I want to make. One is when you were talking about, following a diet plan. I want to just touch on that for a minute because so many of us think of diets as being like, oh, Weight Watchers or Jenny Craig or keto diet or South Beach or, whatever the new diet is. But
mhm,
when we're talking about diets, I'm talking about any prescriptive way of eating. So I can
mhm.
only eat between X hour and X hour. I have to cut out gluten and dairy. Obviously, if people have allergies, that's another situation. I'm talking about for
Yeah,
to be quote unquote healthy and lose
yeah,
weight or something like that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So prescriptive ways of eating that are in the name of health and weight
Got it.
loss.
Got
Got
it.
it.
I know what
So
you're saying.
it
Mhm,
could be it could be like an actual plan, like I need to follow this, I need to eat this number of calories a day, I can only eat a certain number of my macros, like this number of
mhm.
carbs each day.
Yeah,
Anything that tells us how
mhm,
we are supposed to eat and
yeah,
does not actually honor our
mhm,
hunger and fullness cues,
yeah,
our desires for food, our satisfaction with food, that does not use our own internal wisdom to be able
yeah.
to feed ourselves and be connected to our bodies.
Understand.
And that's part of the reason that diets don't work too, is because they disconnect us so deeply from our bodies that then when we do try to eat, we feel out of control and like we can't eat on our own because we keep trying to follow all of these external things telling us how we're
Mhm.
supposed to eat. And then we no longer know how to eat ourselves when we were born with those cues. Think about a baby getting milk. They cry when they're
Yes.
hungry. They turn away as soon as they don't want any more. Toddlers do the same thing, right? They start throwing food off of their high chair. They're done. They turn their face away from the spoon. We
Yeah.
knew how to eat, right?
Yeah.
But then we somewhere along the lines got taught that we couldn't listen to ourselves. Again, eat two
Yeah.
more bites and then you can be done. If you want more bread, you have to eat your vegetables. If you, right? Like all of these things
Yeah.
that taught us that we couldn't actually trust ourselves to eat.
Wow, Nicole, that's good. I'm sorry. That's good, girl. You hit it. That was so good. And you're right. I do believe that these are a lot of learned behaviors, if you will. And it is a lot of listening to our own bodies. And I hear what you're saying as far as like the difference in the different diet trends. I believe you were saying like the fasting, right? I know the fasting diet that goes on where you're starving yourself, you're playing learned behaviors and not allowing our bodies to fully feel and act on their own. Let me pause and I want to ask you, I want to ask you, Nicole, because this is your profession. But I want to ask you, as far as those listeners who are listening, we are coming up on the end of the year, moving into the beginning of the year, and I was talking to you about our dieting and what we're going to do to kick off our new year. Before we wrap this up and before we stop, I want you to help us give us your best advice as far as finishing out this year full of the holidays, full of food, moving into our new year's where probably 90% of us are going to have on the top 3 New Year's resolutions, and that is to what? Lose weight, go on a diet. Tell us how to balance those 2 and have the happiest experience possible. I don't know how else to marry those 2 together. How do we finish out this year and move into the next year the healthiest?
I think what's hard about this in some ways, and it's not that hard, right? I'm like simplifying it. It's hard because we have so much baggage that comes with it that it feels hard to reconnect to ourselves. But
Mhm.
what's hard about it is that it's, like, not the sexy answer, right? Diets are the sexy answer. They're like, "Oh, cut out X, Y, and Z and lose this much weight in this amount of time," or, right, "Follow this plan and then, you'll lose weight, you'll fit in, drop 2 jean sizes, do this, do that." Like, this is a
Mhm.
process. This is not a quick fix. It can't be, right? Because like we talked about, it really is actually healing our relationship with
Mhm.
food and our body. And that does take time. And that is a process of uncovering things and seeing, like, oh, that's what's coming up for me. And so,
Yeah.
there's simple things that we can just start with, though, of even just allowing ourselves to check in with our hunger and fullness, right? Like, am I
Mm.
hungry? Am I full? How do I feel? Kind of rating that. Do I feel neutral? Do I feel very
Right.
hungry? Just like starting to look at that, noticing our behaviors. If at the end of the meal, we're noticing, I feel full, but I still really want to keep eating. Where
Right.
might that be coming from? Right? Like just starting to even check in
Yeah.
with ourselves at all. But so often we beat ourselves up instead of being curious. We have to be more curious about ourselves in our relationship with food instead of, again, the guilt and shame around, what's wrong with you? All you want to do is eat. I'll be better tomorrow. I'll start over after the end of the year. It's really about checking in and starting to make that connection. So, it's
Wow.
I'll have people do things like setting a timer on their phone to just do a check-in throughout the day that just says, "How am I feeling right now? Am I hungry? Am I full? Do I need some water? Do I need to go to
Well,
the bathroom?" Right? Like, we're so disconnected from our
wow.
bodies all the time. So, it's just starting to reconnect in some way. I mean, there's so many layers to it. We have to look at our beliefs around food. Do we believe that certain foods are good and other foods are bad, that we shouldn't have them? Because we didn't even dive into this, but restriction and deprivation, and I don't only mean that as like physical deprivation, but mental deprivation, telling ourselves, I shouldn't have that. I'm not supposed to eat that. I'll
Oh, wow.
stop eating that tomorrow. I'll whatever. That creates what we call like anticipated deprivation, the idea that I'm going to be good tomorrow, right? So, like, I shouldn't have
Mm,
these foods. So, any sense of deprivation actually
mhm,
causes us to be more preoccupied with those foods and tend to eat more of them. So, when we have
mm,
these ideas about good food versus bad food, that creates a sense of deprivation and
mhm,
makes us want those other foods even more. It makes us feel out of control with those foods when we are around them, right? It makes us gravitate
right,
towards them. So we have to create
right.
more of a sense of food neutrality, that like food is just
Mm,
food. It doesn't make you a good person or a bad person based on what you eat, right? This is built into
right.
our language. I'm being good today. Oh, I've been so bad lately. Oh, I've been, right? It's just,
Yeah.
food is not moral. What you eat does not determine who you are as a
Wow.
person. We have to get rid of that language because language is so powerful, right? And it really affects the way that we feel about ourselves and what we believe about ourselves to be true with food. So if we're constantly
Wow.
telling ourselves, I can't be around that food because I'm always, I'll never stop eating it. Well, we live into those stories that we tell ourselves. So again,
Mm,
there's just so many layers, but it's partially this reconnection to ourselves. And it's partially really examining our beliefs about food and questioning them and seeing how can I create more neutrality with food and with myself for the choices that I make around food and drop some of these layers of the guilt and shame that I have associated with food in my body.
wow. I never thought about it like that at all, Nicole. I feel like a lot of who we are, the decisions that we make, our growth process begins with what we tell ourselves. And
Mhm.
that is even surrounding food, exercise, friendships. Just
Yeah.
there's so much where we worship at, where we don't worship at, where we what we do with our time. I hear you so loud and clear that we perhaps give food more presence and authority in our lives and what it really, it's there to feed us.
Yeah.
It's there to keep us alive. And if we just kind of take that pressure off of ourselves concerning it, we'll get to have a better relationship with it.
Yeah, I think it
Oh,
goes full circle,
oh
right? With
man.
yeah.
Gosh. Okay. That's why you do what you do, and you are so good at it. I feel good. Nicole,
Good.
I want to thank you. I want to stop here. And before I close this out, I want to ask you, did you have anything that you would like to share with our listeners? Any last words, any final thoughts that you feel that we should just take away with us?
I suppose the last thing that kind of maybe sums up everything that we were talking about is that us having a healthy relationship with food, I should say first, a healthy relationship with food, as far as I'm concerned, is the foundation to be able to eat quote unquote healthy, which to
Mm,
me is not any sort of prescriptive way of eating. It's to be able to get the nutrients that we need to nourish our body well
yeah,
and to feel good in our body, right? Like that's what it means to eat healthy, to eat in a balanced way that feels good to us. And that doesn't mean cutting out any foods, anything like that, right? Like, but that's the foundation. We can't apply these ideas about food and nutrition that I should only eat this amount or eat that amount if we don't have a solid foundation. So we still need to have first and foremost a solid foundation and connection, which is a healthy relationship with food.
yeah,
But bigger than that, everything around our relationship with food is built on trust and learning to trust ourselves to eat again. And so
yeah.
that has to be at the core of it all. And you brought this up when you said, right, it's what we say to ourselves. And even if we
Mhm.
can't yet say, I trust myself to eat what I need, I trust myself to nourish my body, we can start at least saying, I'm learning to trust myself. Right.
Yeah,
And how can we start teaching ourselves that? And when we say that, just think about the way that we relax with food a bit more and that we can feel like, yeah, I can tune in a little bit more easily when I relax instead of having all of these rules and ideas about how I'm supposed to eat.
yeah,
So we have to come back and really start building
mm,
that trust again, even if it's not there yet. We have to start
yeah,
somewhere with creating it.
yeah. Ah, Nicole, you're so right. This is so good. Knew it would be. I'm sorry, I really did. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us here at the Well. Nicole, if you would just take a couple of minutes to tell our listeners where to find you, where they can follow your information. To everyone listening, Nicole, I am working on her next book because she will become a published author. Because she is a wealth of knowledge. She has so many good things that we all need to have on our shelves within our own reach, where we can share this good knowledge with everyone who needs to hear what she has to say. Nicole, tell us where we can find you and where we can follow you and where we can book you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely present on Instagram and I recently changed my handle actually. So now it's Diet Free Family. So you can find me at Diet Free Family on Instagram. And I also have my website, NicoleCruzRD.com. And there, you can find more information. If you go to my website or if you DM me, just DM me on Instagram. I offer like a free, 20-minute call to just chat about things too, to see if we might be a fit to work together in any way. So you can absolutely do that. I work with individuals, teenagers, and adults on really healing their own relationship with food. And I work with parents who really don't want to pass that stuff on to their children. And we talk about both what we were diving into today, all of the energy around food and those things, but also actual strategies for how we handle food in our homes to set our kids up for success. So it's a little bit of both. So I would love to support anybody that could use some extra help, and or if you just want to follow along, come join me on Instagram.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us today at the Well. If you guys want more information, I will definitely list the contact information for Nicole down in the description. Thank you so much for joining us on Woman Witness Podcast of Stories at the Well. I am Leah Fortier. Thank you, Nicole Cruz, for joining us today. And if you have any more questions, continue to follow us on the Well. All right. Till next time. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.